Welcome. We are so excited to have Geneviève and Rob here again to talk about their sweet Liam and also about stuff that's helped them as this time has gone on. It's been a little over a year at the time of this recording. And so, welcome again. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to share things that were helpful. I think I mentioned in the days and weeks right after Liam's death, your podcast was so helpful, and the advice episodes were just a light in the tunnel for me. So I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to contribute.
Yes, and thanks to all the moms and dads that shared their advice. So yes, we are so grateful that you're here. So actually, let's back up a little bit. So tell me about. So like I mentioned, it's been about a little over a year, and you guys actually just celebrated his birthday or anniversary, whatever everybody wants to call it, but just a few days ago, and he passed away at about 24 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was 24 weeks on the medical chart, but we know it was closer to 26.
26, that's
Yeah.
right, and, you just started going into premature labor, and that was hard, and, he was born via emergency C-section, and he just didn't make it past he was just not he had passed away, whether in labor or during the birth, so, once again, I'm so sorry about that, and tell me about how that time after you guys came home, and I know that there was a lot of a struggle, and you got him home, in his urn pretty quickly after. But how were those first couple of months right after? What did that look like for you guys as you mourned and grieved? And what are some of the things that really helped you in those early kind of hard days?
Yeah, well, your podcast.
Uh, I'm
I'm an avid reader. I read a lot. I love books. So I bought all the books on
awesome.
child loss, and just to name a few that were kind of pivotal for me.
Yeah.
Ask Me His Name, Still, a memoir of love, loss, and motherhood. The Year of Magical Thinking. Empty Cradle. I think everyone's read
Yeah.
Empty Cradle.
Mhm.
Who's
Yep.
kind of been in this boat. It's okay that you're not okay. It's just
Yes.
there's a lot of reading happening, and I think some of the important things that kind of gleamed from that was a lot of tools, and I
Mm.
think just kind of learning the skill set to navigate the onslaught of devastation and heartbreak, and I think having those voices of people who went through it and having advice episodes like this one really just was so helpful. So I think, one of those things was, I think after your child dies, you really just kind of want to give up.
Yeah.
You just want to hit the pause button or the stop button and just stop living. Um, and I think for me, I kept coming back to, well, who's Liam's mom?
Mm.
Right. So, is Liam's mom the person who gives herself a minute of the day to really feel it and then get back up? Or is Liam's mom the person who's sprawled on the floor,
Mm.
weeks at a time? And I honestly feel however you need to process, do what you need to do to process. But for me, my driving force was I am going to be Liam's mom for the rest of my life. Who is Liam's mom? Who do I want that person to be? And who would have made my son proud?
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, that was the big motivating factor to getting up in the morning and showering and eating. And
Yes.
really just, I guess, coming back to life. Um, so I think as a personal motivation, that was really helpful. And then I was, so lucky and grateful to have a good support system. I had
Mhm.
midwives who were checking in on me physically and mentally and emotionally. I had Rob who was by my side, all the time. And whatever I needed, he was there for me. He let me talk until I couldn't talk. He let me scream until I was done screaming, cry until I was dried out. Just having someone who just let me process how I needed to process for as long as I needed to process
Yeah.
was an incredible respite and an incredible comfort for me.
Really just a nice safe space.
Yes.
It's a credit to you, Rob, because I feel the same way about my husband is that he let me be a hot mess for several I would say several months. Like, there were times when I just could not stop crying, or,
Yeah.
like, other times I was like, I'm just gonna be numb for a little bit. I'm just gonna watch TV and not do anything." And so it's a credit to you to
Mm.
allow, Jen to have that space, I guess.
Uh, I mean, I don't know where it came from because before Liam's death, I would have said I had no emotional intelligence whatsoever. Like, uh, but yeah, somehow in this I found a well of it, and I think part of it is just understanding that um, the hot mess, it comes and goes in waves, but um, it there there is a light at the end of that tunnel. It is an important part of processing that grief, um, and the only way to make it better is you know to live through it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. And I think that's such a great insight because it's not an insight that everyone has. Your friends and
Yes.
family want to support you and they want to be helpful. And it's just sometimes they just kind of miss the mark. And I remember reading one of my books, one of the authors was like, just tell them what you need. And I thought that's so simple. And yet, yes, okay. So when, someone, a loved one says something or does something or is trying to be helpful and
Yep.
they don't quite get there, I found myself saying, what would be helpful is X. What would be comforting is Y. Just giving examples and things I specifically needed so that they're
Yeah.
not left guessing. Because, I think, yeah, we live in a culture where bereavement and grief aren't really well understood. And so
Mm-mm.
it's crummy that it lays on us to educate people. But I think the aftermath is so much better if you just say, look, this is what I need.
Yep. Yes, I I just want to point out how important that point is, just to because we're let's be honest, we're terrible at guessing what other people want. And so we might as well try and help them out. And that this is just a general rule of, like, this is a rule that my husband and I have, just like it's like, I'm not gonna know if you want flowers. You gotta tell me you want flowers or whatever, right? Like, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
But then there's other times where you're just like, I just need a meal. Like, I can't keep my crap together to, like, go shopping and make a meal. And those are the things that you could
yeah,
easily ask for, and people will do it because I think that people want to help, right? They want to help in this situation.
yeah.
And
And they just don't know how.
yep.
So I think, one of our loved ones stayed really quiet and didn't
Mm,
reach out for like a month and didn't really say anything. And, one day I think I reached out and said, it's kind of painful that I haven't heard from you.
oh, mhm,
And they explicitly said, I just don't know how to help, what to say, what to
mhm.
do. And I gave them a list. These
Good.
are the things you can do. This is how you can help. This is what you can say. And they've been wonderful since
Yeah.
because the want is there.
Mhm.
It's just not the know how. And it's, I think, just one of those things. Rob said something to me a while ago, was like, you have to remember they're trying. It's like,
Mhm.
right, right. They are trying. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the highlight there.
I one other thing I wanted to point out, your, relative or friend that hadn't reached out, that happens a little bit more than it's like, it's surprising because you think people would be ready, but it really is. We live in a culture that is not great about teaching how to help people through, grief and mourning and that type of thing. So yes, give people a break. They might be trying. They might be just trying in their heart, like maybe paralyzed with fear that they're going to say the wrong thing. So,
Yeah. And I guess it also, I mean, in my specific situation, it kind of helps that I'm very much like not going to hold my tongue. So if I have something to say to you, I'm just going to come out and
yeah.
say it. So, you know, not everyone has that security in a relationship to be able to say, hey, you're hurting me.
Yeah.
What your behavior is doing is hurting me. But I think if that relationship is important enough, I think you're willing to do it, even though you're the one kind of taking on that burden. So,
Yeah.
um, I just think it's one of those things where if one person doesn't say anything, the other person doesn't say anything, and then that's kind of it, you know.
Yeah, the time has passed. It feels kind of awkward if it's brought
Yeah,
up
yeah,
again, yeah. Just
yeah,
say it, right? I mean, like, yeah.
yeah. Just come out.
Just come out. Just say it. Ask for what you need. And I think that's a
Yeah.
nice act of self-care to
Yes,
state what you want or state what you need at that time.
absolutely. I think yeah, what was it like after the immediate after, I think, to be totally frank, you know, was it's just me just trying to get through the day. I think a lot of us who go through it we're just trying to, at first it's like just get through the few minutes, just get through the first hour, just
Yeah.
get through the first day. And um I found it really helpful to have a goal in mind. Like I think I shared in my episode, you know, for me it was really important to have my son back physically with me.
Mhm.
So having that goal to work at every day and having that thing to do every day
Yeah.
for me was kind of a big deal. And there was this one book, I think it was by Zoe Clark Coates,
Mhm.
Saying Goodbye. And she had 90 days of support. And so every day was a way to kind of support yourself and practice self love and self care.
Oh.
And having something to do, like I said, a goal in mind every
Mhm.
day. So, okay, you know, the first week was I need to get my son back. The second week was going through that book. So one day was, you know, write something you remember about your son and you loved
Mhm.
about your son, and you kind of bask in this little love space. And
Yeah.
another day would be a different task. So I think those little motivating factors, at least for me, were really helpful. Small moments in a sea of, you know, devastation and heartbreak.
Yeah. Just something to kind of focus on. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is so good. And I mean, when you even said, my goal that day was to take a shower or to eat something. And I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yeah.
is because when you're so early in your grief, at least it was for me, it was hard to like eat something. It was just like, I just don't feel like it. I've cried so much. My
Right.
stomach is full of tears. And so I don't feel like eating. And so,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
it's difficult. Robert, how about you? What was that like? I know that you were a huge support, but there had to be some. Oh, it probably was a little rough for you too. I suspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hadn't just had surgeries, so I was the
True.
one who was up and about and was just trying to keep the house together and um just doing all the things we would normally do on top of you know uh trying to be a support to Jen. Um once once Jen's mom was able to get out here, I think I actually went back to work just half days, but it was pretty quick.
Was there anything you found helpful in those early days?
Was going back to work helpful?
Yeah, going back to work was helpful. It was one of those things where I think I probably felt bad about it on some level, that I felt like I was ignoring what had just happened.
Right.
um, and I that certainly isn't fair to myself, or to you know anybody else who would be trying to find other things to distract them. I think I think it's important to have other things in your life beyond the grief, but obviously at the start, that's going to be nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of easing back into those things, whether it's work or house chores, um, at the rate that you can,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got to be different for everyone. And for me, it was just a matter of days. So but I made it a half day so that I made sure that I was only gone for a few hours. And during that time, I could take care of whatever really needed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back home and make sure that we were doing the work of remembering our son.
Yeah, it's it's so hard. And this is an interesting thought you brought up of like there is maybe some level of guilt of going back so soon, and but your brain just can't like be like you're going to just shut down if you're grieving too much, I think. So that's why I was like, yes, there's some guilt to it, but also it's helpful to help have a little bit of distraction or have a little bit of change of scene or something when I after we lost our son. So,
And I think everyone processes in their own way,
mhm.
and you can't expect everyone's going to process the same,
Yep.
right? So, um, just kind of recognizing you're each doing what you need to do
Mhm.
to kind of cope and deal
Yep.
with what you can. And
Well, even as a couple too, you're gonna deal very differently sometimes,
yeah,
and it might be frustrating for one spouse or the other to feel like, "Why aren't you, like, sobbing on the ground about this?" Or, "Why," but it is we're just very different people, and we have to process it differently, so,
yeah,
yes.
I think having that space to just say, okay, I'm sure he's grieving in his own way.
Yeah.
I'm grieving in my way, and he's letting me grieve in my way. So
Yeah.
he
Which
needs to
is
grieve in his way. Yeah.
yes, exactly, kinda giving that permission of you can grieve the
Yeah.
way you need to grieve, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's excellent. So a couple of things, um, Geneviève, we talked a little bit, kind of between our episodes and stuff, but you mentioned a couple of things that I thought were lovely from the books that you read. Would you mind sharing those things? Because I think these are really super important to talk about and hear and discuss. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that stuck with me was the idea that love is never ending.
yeah.
It's the only part of us that keeps on living.
Mhm.
And, all the other things you feel when your child passes away is, the fear and the devastation and the anger and all these other things and sadness. And, they all just, after time, there's always the waves, but they all just kind of dissipate and kind of fall into the background a little bit. And the seems the only thing that's really still vibrant is the love.
Yeah.
And, I think keeping that at the forefront, at least for me, has been really key to kind of getting through it and, getting through that first year. And a lot of things end, but love doesn't.
Yeah.
That stays with you. And that's, for me, the part of Liam that lives.
Yeah. When you told me that quote, I was just like, "Oh, that's so beautiful." Because I just, pictured, you just kind of walking along and you may have, several coats or something on, and then as time goes on, you just shed a coat or a sweater or whatever, and ultimately, when you come down to it, it's like you've just got something close to you that is just always with you. You may have shed some of those other things that have been there before but you've still got that love for your son, and I just thought that was a
Absolutely.
beautiful it was a beautiful picture, so thank you so much for sharing that one. And then there was one more I think that I wanted you to share as well.
So I was that was actually a conversation I was having with my
Oh.
midwife.
Oh, that's okay.
And we were talking about how difficult the loss has been. And, um, it came up that Mother Nature has an incredible way of connecting mothers to their babies.
Mhm.
We feel them in the womb. We, talk to them. We engage with them. We get to know them and their patterns. And, you're so bonded with your baby.
Yeah.
And nature just has a real way of letting that go. And, that couldn't be more accurate because there's really no way to detach yourself from your son, or at least for me, from my son. And
Yeah.
I just thought that was such an aha moment because, how can we expect our bodies and ourselves to connect so deeply with something and then recover from that? Like, it's just you don't, because you're attached, you're bonded,
Yeah.
like I said, that love is never ending.
Yeah.
So, um, for me, it was like an aha moment. Like, I shouldn't expect, nature to have come up with a solution for this because there's no solution.
Yeah.
So,
You're meant to you were meant to have bonded with your baby, and
yeah,
that's the
and love
key.
your baby forever, and you're
Yeah.
going to. And,
Mhm.
I guess that kind of leads me to another thing. Was another part of the book was, you know, you're going to love your baby forever. And that's just love. That grief, that pain, that's just love that has nowhere to go.
Yep.
So how do you parent your child when your child isn't physically present? And to me, that was like, okay, that means that love needs somewhere to go.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
love needs a way to be expressed.
Yeah.
And that's, for us has been, his legacy projects and the way we put his love out there in the world. We did a couple of things that we thought we would have engaged with him. So, I think I mentioned I worked in homeless services, and there's a homeless shelter downtown here that was generous enough to give us some space. We built a little computer lab for our
Oh.
homeless neighbors to have access to resources and information. And we called that Liam's Lab. I think Rob would have spent so much time building computers with Liam. And that's, a way for us to express that love. And, I think I shared that the experience at the hospital was really challenging. And so, getting a little toolkit together and finding ways to kind of support those families as the loss is happening, not after the fact when they, don't need these answers anymore. They need them in the
Exactly.
moment, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
not regretting it later in the future that they didn't do all these things maybe in the hospital.
Right, right. And I think, just from our toolkit that we've built up, some of those things are like spending time together. Is there
Mhm.
anyone you want to call, partners, family, friends, ways to make memory? Do you want to have some skin to skin? You can do that. And,
Mhm.
do you want to bathe them and sing to them and read to them? It's just all these options that we really either weren't presented with or didn't have the wherewithal to think
Right.
about in that moment. So I think another thing is also just kind of being aware of your parental rights. I mean, I don't know about you and Lee, but we had no idea what our parental rights were in
Mhm.
that moment. Um, so that's something we're building into our toolkit. You have the right to spend that time with your baby. And um, in this, certain states have different regulations, but that's something that, you can find out. And some hospitals will have a cuddle cot. You can ask for that. You can
Yep.
ask for the cooling blankets. You can, if it's not offered, you have the right to ask for these things. And there's just so much about it that I think we were left just not knowing in the moment.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's a big way of expressing, my love for Liam is ways to make the world a little bit better. And I think, building that little toolkit would do that for some family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kinda wanna expand a little bit about this toolkit because I thought when I heard about it was really cool. Because like you said, there are some hospitals that are well equipped. They have regular training on, like these situations where like bereavement, stillbirth, infant loss, the nurses, the staff are well trained. And in your case, that did not happen. And so Jen is actually building a toolkit that will go out to and hopefully educate staff members and people that will be interacting with other lost parents in the future. Because, you really don't have a brain. You're in so much shock, and to have something where it's like, oh, I could do something like this, and having, like you said, nurses and other staff members help and encourage and like, you can ask for this. It's just, I think it's so cool. So I will put a link in show notes and in the description box so that we have a little bit more information on that if that's something that you need in your area too, because we don't want those moms and dads to feel like they just gave birth to their baby and were, pushed out the door and like didn't get to do anything with their baby. So I think that's really cool. Um,
Yeah. And I think the dream is, for the reality is that not every hospital has the same policies, not every state has the same policies. And there's so much variation just even within one county.
yes.
So I think my dream would be to see someone see this toolkit and say, oh, I can adapt that for my city, my town, my county, my
Yes.
hospital, and adapt it, make it fit for what you need it to fit for. And for people to use the information they can use and discard the things they don't find helpful. Because, I like to think that Liam would have grown to be the kind of person who wanted to make the world just a little bit better.
Yeah. That's so cool. You also, I wanted to ask both of you. So you mentioned one of the things in this book was about how to parent your child after they've passed away, and I've brought that up with several of my friends that have not experienced a loss, and they're like, "What? What is that? I don't understand that."
Yeah.
So, for those who may not understand what that means to parent your child after loss, what does that look like for the two of you? What feels good in parenting Liam?
Yeah. I definitely get the awkward reactions
Yeah.
you might get from that. Um, but I think it makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Your baby might not physically be here, but your motherhood is still very present. Your maternal instinct to nurture is still very present. I think if you have I know someone who has an urn in a certain shape, and she knits little like sweater capes for the
Oh,
urn and dresses the urn, and for her that's how she parents. For me, Liam's urn is in our bedroom, so every morning I wake up and I talk to him and I hold him and have a moment. And every 11th of the month is a special day to us now. It's a day that we, donate to an organization or somewhere in
oh,
his name. And or we
Volunteer.
volunteer. Yeah, we do what we can to honor him in that day.
yeah.
So I think for us that's a way to continue to parent him, even as the months go on. And I think another thing is I still talk to my son. Sometimes I talk to him in my head, sometimes in my heart, sometimes out loud, sometimes physically to him.
Yeah.
um, and I think, I guess maybe it might be a little loosey goosey for some people, but for me, it feels right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the key with parenting after loss is what feels right to you,
Mhm.
what is most true to how you would have parented.
Yeah.
And for me, those are the things that would have been true. I 100% would have taken Liam with me to volunteer in places. I 100%
Yeah.
believe that he would have built a computer lab with Rob. Like these are things that we would have done anyway.
Yeah.
So
I suppose, for my part, I made him some promises in that hospital room. And I think a big part of continuing, to parent him is keeping those promises.
Mhm.
So I said I would do my best to take care of Jen and do what I needed to do. It's, it's little things, little promises that, and to some extent, are just for me and him to know. But it's a way that, I keep his memory alive. And we also do some things, that are easier, like when we're doing puzzles, we think of him, because when he was alive, we were, in the middle of doing a very large
Oh, really?
puzzle. Yeah.
Well, the pandemic will do that to you,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. That's true.
We puzzled so much.
We did do a lot of puzzles, and I think, continuing to do them, even though now we're more or less back to our normal lives. The puzzles have kind of stuck around at our house.
Yeah. And I think another thing is also when we spend time with friends, which we can do now.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're very generous in letting us talk about Liam.
That's so
bring
great.
up his name, bring up
Yeah.
the things we're doing. It's not quite parenting, but I guess it's an engagement. We have a friend who was very generous and made a donation and dedicated a garden at a transitional housing community in Liam's name. And so just having those ways to still keep him around, talk about him, engage with him, and knowing that our innermost, loving circle is also thinking about him and also talking about him. I think for us is a kind of a way to parent too, because when you're a parent and you gather with your friends, you talk about your kids.
Talk about your kids. That's what happens, and it's just natural, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are just kind of a bunch of little ways we keep parenting in our way.
That's beautiful. Now, Rob, you mentioned something I want to follow up on. So you mentioned you made a promise to him to take care of Jen for like a year after, and I think that's really a sweet to make sure that you take care of her. That because I know my husband Lee was just that way. He really made sure that I was doing okay, and so I appreciate that. Would you like to comment on anything else on that?
Sure. The taking care of her is forever, but
yes, of course, yes, but very, very intentionally making sure she is okay. Yeah,
but you are right. I did also promise that for a year I wouldn't allow myself to feel sorry for myself, which is a bit different, and it kind of feels like bad advice in a way, because I wouldn't want to encourage anyone to not keep tabs on how they're feeling, and or to deny how they're feeling. But for me, this promise is a little different in that it was more about understanding that this was something we were going to have to live through. And I didn't want to be an impediment to that. And so to that end, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to grieve, but I wanted to leave out the part where I just feel like this unfairness is being dumped on me. And, even though the situation is unfair, even though these are perfectly valid feelings, to me, they're not as productive. They're not as meaningful as, say, the grief you feel in the loss. And that doesn't mean that I never felt sorry for myself. I absolutely started to a whole bunch of times. I just didn't let myself wallow in it, because I reminded myself that I told my son I wasn't going to do that. I was going to give it a year. And then if I still wanted to feel a little bit of that way, I'd let myself maybe wallow a little bit. But
Not staying there necessarily, just
Right.
yeah.
And I think that's been meaningful to us finding a way through this tragedy.
I was gonna say, I just in my short interactions with you both, I have noticed that you are I think, a very tight couple. And and that doesn't actually happen in these kind of big tragedies. Like, unfortunately, couples drift apart. They get angry with each other because they're not mourning the same way, or they're not asking for what they need. And so, is there any other things that you have done to kind of tighten your bond? I obviously, Rob, you just mentioned making sure that Jen is fine, like, and taking care of her, and then also not wallowing in self-pity, I think uh, that is also, I personally think a good bit of advice because, you can feel the sadness and feel the grief and feel the mourning, but you can stay there a little too long that it's unhealthy, actually. So, any other things that you guys have done to stick together as a couple?
As a couple, actually, there was one thing I just remembered. So when we were in the hospital, not right after, but yeah, when they took Liam to the funeral home,
Mm, mhm.
I think I had a really hard few hours after that.
Yeah.
And Rob just held me and just let me get through it. And it felt like I was drowning. And when it feels like I was able to come up for air,
Mhm.
it's a few hours later, and I told Rob, we have pets. we have we have a dog, we have a cat. They need to like eat. Um,
Yeah.
so why don't you go home, deal with that, and take some time. Take some time at home
Mm,
to sit if you need to. Do what you need to do for you, because I knew that while he was physically with me, he was doing what he needed to do for me.
mhm.
And so I remember thinking, I went through this whole night. It was horrific. He also went through this whole night, but he's been supporting me nonstop. So I think, yeah, I told him to just go home and just basically take care of you for a second so that I can so that you can take care of me
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Just
A
Yeah.
li
um
a little
There's
recharge.
definitely
yeah, yes, go home and take a reboot.
Yeah.
there's that aspect of acknowledging that we each have needs that are
Yeah.
different from one another's, and being okay with either facilitating or allowing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he came home and was gone a bit, and I think I messaged him at that point and was like, okay, I need you again. And he was like, okay, I'm coming. And so it was very much like, okay, I'm tapping out, you're on deck. And
Yep.
then when I just couldn't anymore, I was like, okay, come back,
Yeah.
tap back in because I need support. So I think that was we've done kind of different versions of that, I guess.
Yeah.
When I'm at my lowest, he's kind of tapped in and taking over when he's feeling low, and I'm tapped in and I'm on. And
And big part of why I did that year was because I knew that early on there was going to be a lot of moments where I had to be the vanguard on
Right.
any number of things that in our lives would have generally been uh, Jen's purview.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really I like your little promise that you made to Liam about that, and then I just like this idea of like, okay, handing it off. Okay, it's your turn now. Please help me. I just like the idea. It's a very teamwork oriented. I think a
Mhm.
lot of couples don't really think of it that way, of like kind of handing off. Like, I need you to show up now. I need you to show up for the both of us, and then okay, it's your turn now. And that's really just a beautiful relationship that you guys have. I just think it's really
Well,
cool.
thank you. And for the record, I had hard days too, so it wasn't always just one way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's definitely the case. We need our time to process this, and so I
Yeah.
think it's cool that you guys have taken the time. It sounds like, and are still continuing to take the time to grieve the way you need to grieve. So I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. A couple of last things that I like to ask as part of this. What are some things that people did for you or said to you that were really, really super helpful? Like anything that kind of stood out to you that maybe somebody who is listening and is supporting another lost mom or dad that they could do in turn to help.
Yeah. So my best friend lives in Denver,
Hmm.
and she was incredible in just letting me talk and sitting in that grief and sadness with me, not just next to me.
Yeah.
Having someone, I think, who will cry with you and be sad with you and have the bravery and vulnerability to sit in that low, low space with you was just so comforting to me. I have a really good friend here in the city who came over, brought food, and did the same thing, just cried with me and listened to me and asked me questions about Liam. And that was just so helpful. You know, you don't need a lot of people, right? You just need a village and
Yeah.
little village. And just having people who would just come and sit in the sadness with you
Yeah.
rather than, being distanced from it, I think for me was really healing in some ways.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just I like that distinction that you said not they're sitting with you, not just next to you. Like it's not just somebody comforting you like patting you on the back, but it's
Right.
somebody that is weeping with you and is they're involved in you. They're like they're a part of your story and they want to
Yeah.
know all of what's happening to you. And I
And not trying to make it better because
no,
there's just
yes.
no way to make this better.
Yeah, there's no way. There,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And so I think letting people have that space to just be sad, because we have this culture, unfortunately, that wants to fix everything, right?
Right. Right. And
You
I
got to be
think,
happy.
yeah, and acknowledging that you can't fix it, right? You
Yes.
just kind of need to provide that space for
Mm,
someone to feel it and process it and share what they want to and need to share.
yeah.
I think for me specifically, having such a traumatic, hard
Hmm.
evening, just getting it out of my system
Yeah.
was so pivotal.
Yeah.
I mean, that took a couple therapists too,
I'm
but having
sure.
good friends nearby certainly helped.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Rob? Anything that sticks out in your mind of anything that's been super helpful or anything somebody said or did?
I mean, much in the same way, I'm glad that I've had supportive coworkers who, you know, have let work be an escape when I needed
Mm,
work to be an escape. And sometimes when I need to, make lunchtime a long, sad uh, you know, dissection of everything that's happened to me in the past month. They've let me do that too.
hmm,
Um, but I also liked something that one of our therapists mentioned, which was to find something that since Liam's death you haven't been able to do.
mm,
And for me, that's been sing. Jen and I are both pretty good singers. She's better than me,
Yeah,
but um,
you're better.
it's it's just been something that I haven't really been able to do. My voice breaks, and this therapist encouraged me to just keep trying to do it. Not not to the point of frustration, but to just continue to work at that wall. And the effect has been twofold. One is I am getting closer to being able to sing, and feel like I would be singing for my son.
Mm.
But the other is that even when I fail and I can't do it and I sound terrible, I feel closer to him
Mm.
because I recognize that that difficulty for me is a connection to my sadness, and all that sort of surrounds what happened to the three of us. So, you know, if you got something that is been blocked for you, I would tell people to keep working at it, and to see what it brings you.
That is fascinating. I'm like, wow, those are just kind of this working at it little by little to get where you want to be in regards to that you're singing. I just think that's really pretty and tender and lovely. Thank you so much for sharing both of those really lovely thoughts about what to do that might help or what might be something to try.
Yeah. And I think if I could add one more thing, I
Please.
just remembered. So for those of us that might have a scar or some sort of physical marker of
Yeah.
that birth or that experience, it's really easy to fall into this place where that scar is just an ugly reminder of
Yeah.
horrible things. And I spent so much time having a challenge with my scar
Mm.
from the cesarean. And so I think one thing that one of the counselors said to me was, what if you don't look at your scar that way? What if you look at it as proof of
Mm.
how much you loved your son, that you were willing to get just shredded into ribbons to try to save your son? And so what if you don't look at it like a horrible scar? What if you see it like that's you loving your son, trying to save your son?
That's how
Yeah.
far you would go for him.
That's how far you would go for him. Exactly. And
Yeah.
that to me was such, again, another aha moment,
Mhm.
because there's so much of, I think, postpartum that stays with you. Um, and it's, of course the pregnancy for some might be hard, the birth for some might be hard, the loss is absolutely devastating for
Mhm.
everyone, and then there's postpartum.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother thing to process and get through. And I guess that's just something I would want to maybe throw out into the world is, what if all of the milk that came in wasn't a devastating thing? What if that was, um, you know, how much my body loved my son and how
Yes.
ready and willing it was to nourish him?
Yeah.
So and I know that, I think there's a delicate space between toxic positivity and just realistic
Yeah.
vulnerability and understanding of people's feelings. But I think for me, it was really helpful
Yeah. That
to
that reframing is really
reframe.
nice. Like, just shifting that just a little bit so that it's like, "Yeah, my body did that." Like, I
Yeah.
went through that because I love him so much. Ugh,
Right.
that's
Right.
cool.
And that doesn't negate the
No.
horribleness of it. It
Yeah.
it just it adds another layer. And I think if anything, grief is so layered.
Yeah.
So I think it just helps kind of balance out.
Mhm. Some of the yeah. I just think that's beautiful, just that, like, additional evidence of your love. I think it's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. Okay, on the flip side, is there anything that you would recommend people not say or not do, um, that can be helpful that can be actually very hurtful to somebody that's lost a baby, that would add to their grief and add to their
Yeah.
sadness?
I think know your audience
Yeah.
is kind of basic, right? I mean, I completely respect and leave space for people who practice a religion and find comfort and
Mhm.
joy in that. Um, Rob and I don't practice a religion. And
Mhm.
so getting a lot of he's an angel, God is with him. It just did not feel to me respectful of my parenting, of my motherhood, or of
Right.
my son.
Yeah.
So for me, that actually made things worse.
Yeah.
It fueled me with anger.
Mm.
Because that's not how I wanted to approach my son's loss.
Yeah.
And you can't control what other people say, but I didn't find that helpful. Basically, any language or verbiage that tries to fix the situation.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, he's gone, but you'll have another one. Yes, he's gone, but it's just, maybe instead of speaking, just listen. Just listen.
Mhm.
Let them talk or not talk. Give them the space to process how, whoever that lost parent is needs to process. And I think that would be, yeah, there were a lot of really unhelpful things
Yeah.
that people said. And I think if I was talking to someone who had someone close that just became a lost parent, I would say, talk a little less, listen a little more.
Yep. Yes.
And if, I think bring some frozen cabbage. I,
It helps everybody.
it helps. Yeah. I, I guess that's what I would do. What about you?
I mean, I'm very much the person who always assumes people are trying and aiming for the best. So I think anytime someone said something to me that wasn't helpful, it just kind of rolled off.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, Rob was the one reminding me that, remember, people are trying. And it was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately there is no requirement to say anything.
Maybe just, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
What do you want to share? What do you need us to know?
Yeah. Those are great questions. Great alternative questions. And just some silence, like a little more listening, like you said. I think that's really good. My husband is the nicer one of the two of us. And he has the same idea. He's like, people mean well. It might not come off that way, but they do mean well. And so he does let it, like you said, he just lets it roll off his back. And generally he's very good natured about that kind of stuff, even though something might like, ooh, that was not probably the best thing to say. So well, I think that some wise words that you guys shared with us. Um so I just as we close, I would love if you guys have anything else that I have missed that you would love to share about your grief or mourning or things that really just have helped your heart. I would love for you to share if you've got anything else you'd like to talk about.
I think I'm sorry. I forgot one more thing.
Let's hear it.
Having our closest friends have kept checking in on us.
Yes.
Like I think I shared, I have a really good friend in Holland and she's
Mhm.
a whole 9 hours away and I
Yeah.
still get messages. How are you
Oh.
doing? How are you doing today? Thinking of Liam. And um, so I think just, and I mean, some of your best friends definitely do that. It just it's been a year, but having that continuous check-in,
Yeah.
just we recognize, having someone recognizing that this is a lifelong experience at this point. So
Yeah, you're gonna not be you will not have that baby here on earth. And so yeah, I love that check-in. Just I remember even getting cards from this one woman in our neighborhood and she just kept sending cards and like just thinking about you. I saw this card, I thought about you and it was like 10 months later and I was like, she's still sending me a card. That's awesome. So, yeah, the constant
yeah,
check-in is awesome. So,
yeah. I guess that's all the advice I've got.
I didn't think I had any advice to begin with. So
you have it. Yeah, if you've been through this, you've got it. You know you know some stuff. So, uh, I I really wanna thank you both. It was really wonderful talking to you. I'm so sorry about Liam but thank you for sharing and contributing to this community, and hopefully your words will will help somebody through their journey as well. And so thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.